When selecting your irons, there are an incredible array of options. In this video, I'm going to be showing you some of the best available in 3 different categories: a blade, cavity back, and forgiving irons, with a few other recommendations sprinkled in as well. The choice of the iron can be individual, but that scale can also be simplified. The better you are at striking your irons, potentially the more benefit you're going to find from a bladed iron. However, if you're a little bit more inconsistent, then potentially choosing something with a little bit more forgiveness will be more beneficial. However, better players, especially tour pros, often favor the bladed iron because they hit the ball from the middle of the club face. These irons offer control on trajectory and spin, but most golfers watching this don't need a blade to play successful shots. You see, most modern irons are designed to get the ball up in the air and often spin a little bit less than blades. And what they do is they rely on descent angle to stop the ball quickly. And I would usually nudge most golfers in this direction because, well, let's face it, golf's just really, really hard. Anyway, on to my recommendations in these categories. There's something about blades which is lovely. They're shiny, they're aspirational, and these irons really do embody that. The TaylorMade P7MBs. Now, the P7MBs were designed for the best ball strikers in the world, according to TaylorMade, players who demand surgical-like control with a pure feel at impact. Now, that's TaylorMade saying this, so see my previous statement when deciding what irons are best for you. However, I don't think it's quite that dramatic. So the MB on these irons stands for muscle back. So it is still a compact bladed head design, but it's not quite as extreme as, say, the P7TWs, the one which are obviously used by Tiger Woods, by Tommy Fleetwood and alike. Before the modern golfer, you can very much consider a muscle back being part of the blade family. Now, the P7MB is a very compact style of head, and honestly, when you strike them from the middle, they feel pretty much as good as any blade out there on the market. And it is that compact nature of them behind the ball that really does make you appreciate that you have to be a consistent ball striker if you want to get the best out of these clubs. So TaylorMade say that they use twice the amount of pressure used throughout the industry when forging these clubs, which makes the metal compress tighter together, which apparently gives a greater and superior feel. And it is feel, which is the important word here, because if you use these irons, you are going to be sacrificing certain things like forgiveness. But in place of that, you are going to be gaining control. However, this is where you need to make sure you're striking it from the center, because if you're not, they're simply not going to be as forgiving as other clubs out there. And I have to say that the feedback from these clubs is really, really good. The testing that I've done, the consistency of the launch, of the trajectory of the spin when struck from around the middle is very, very, very good. I think TaylorMade with this iron have definitely kind of stepped into that category of being alongside those forged family favorites. You know, we're talking Mizuno, we're talking Trixon. That might be a scandalous thing to say, you know, comparing this to a Japanese forged iron, but really, the way that these look, the way that these feel, they're absolutely brilliant. And for a club in this category, yeah, you can't really go wrong with them. So cavity backs are generally going to be bigger than blades. The general idea is to have a cavity in the back of the head, allowing weight to be pushed towards the edges of the club. This allows more forgiveness on off-center strikes. However, cavity backs sit firmly in the middle of the scale because they are something very different than the super forgiving irons, which we're going to get onto. See, modern cavity back irons, they're geared towards offering really good feel. They're also geared towards offering a little bit of forgiveness and also looking good behind the ball. They are really the modern day all-in-one package. And these bad boys are really impressive. the Wilson Dynapower Forged. Now Wilson during the past few years have really been upping their game, especially within the iron category, making some fantastic clubs, but also as an advantage, they usually come in a little bit cheaper than many of their competitors. These irons are a great example of this. Because the club is bigger than a blade, they can stick more stuff in it. So it's forged with a variable face thickness. Now this means more power can be delivered on off-center strike, something bladed irons don't normally offer. You see these things in the bottom of the club? These are power holes, and yes, that is an absolutely terrible name, but it allows the face to flex a little bit more and also save some weight, so Wilson can push a little bit more weight to the perimeter and offer more forgiveness. And you know what? They actually look quite nice behind the ball. You can tell that they're not a pure blade, but I certainly wouldn't turn my nose up at using these. Wow. A little bit more draw because there's a little bit more offset. Now a trade-off of these irons is you're going to lose a little bit of backspin. You know, the way that they're designed, it's all about getting that ball up and out there with as much power as possible. So some better players might turn their noses up at this, but for most golfers watching this from a 10 to a 20 handicap, again, I would steer you into this type of club. So they feel and they look great. The Forged in the title is about the face. So they have that solidity that you would associate with a bladed iron. They've also changed their designs over the past few years, and they do look really, really good. Something which I personally would like to change is that if you haven't already, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. Over 50% of you watching aren't currently subscribed to the channel, and as we march towards 700,000 of you here on YouTube, it'd be great if you're part of that community. Forgiving irons are over here on the scale, but don't let that scare you if you consider yourself a good ball striker. Far too often golfers discount irons which offer help. Park your ego when necessary, because irons like these Titleist T350s are brilliant. Whack! Now the reason that these irons aren't in the cavity section is that they follow a new trend within golf, and that is a hollow-headed iron construction. The club head is hollow bodied like a fairway wood or driver, which allows more face flex, a greater range of weight distribution around the head, and more power. Also, look at the difference in the sole design between this and a blade. This type of sole design on bad lies will just slide through the grass, but also it gets more mass underneath the ball and helps it get in the air. But there are lots of hollow-headed designs out there now. What makes the T350s worthy of this recommendation? Well, they have a greater offset, which means the hosel is set back more from the face, allowing more time for the face to close and not lose shots to the right for a right-handed golfer. The top line here is also thicker to help hide the large arse that these clubs have. But you know what? They still look really nice, especially when compared to some clubs I'm going to show you in a moment. They still offer that feeling of playability. They still have that whisper of a Titleist iron. I don't feel like there's gimmicks here. I feel like this is still a club that I could use proudly. And compared to the TaylorMade, they just spring into the air so easily from pitching wedge all the way down to a 4-iron. But they do not get into the air as easily as these clubs. Now this is a TaylorMade Stealth HD iron. It's a couple of iterations old now, but it really does tip the scale off the end into the super forgiving category. Now these are kind of like a half iron, half fairway wood. It's a hollow-headed construction, really shallow profile, designed to get underneath the ball and just get it up no matter what. But it really does sacrifice on the aesthetics. These are potentially one of the ugliest irons ever made. However, I do want to make sure that you can see this type of club and understand what the other options are out there if you are looking to change your irons.